think it's much easier to go from ultra luxury because you can take a lot of your approach, right? I mean, what's wrong with selling a Chevy Tahoe and treating them like they're buying a Rolls Royce? Absolutely nothing, right? But
treat a Bentley customer like they're buying a Chevy Cruze.
That's a different story.
So. Today, I'm speaking with Lonny Soza, Vice President at Fertitta Auto Group, home to Post Oak Motors, a powerhouse in luxury car sales based in Houston, Texas. We dive into how he's built a customer service culture for selling supercars to the ultra wealthy and the hard-earned skills he brought from his humble origins in the car business as an auction buyer at CarMax, plus much more. A big thank you to our sponsors for making today's episode possible, Auto Hauler Exchange and Podium. And now let's get into the show. Lonny Soza on the CDG podcast. Lonny, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. How you hanging in? Recovering after a long NADA weekend?
It was a long weekend. Yeah, it wasn't expected to be so busy, but it was.
What'd you get into? Give us some of the details.
Well, I mean, of course we're there for business, right? And so business before pleasure, but we had a lot of fun. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you mentioned, well, I know there was a bunch of OEMs that canceled their meetings over there. Did that throw a wrench in your plans? I'm just curious what you ended up, how you ended up spending your time.
Yeah. So, we had meetings scheduled from Wednesday through Sunday, and we had to compact everything that we had on the books for everybody that did show up through Saturday. And lots of flights canceled going in. We had teams driving in there. We ended up having to take a BJ to get in all of our flights. But it was fun. Started out on the right foot. Nice adventure.
All right. Well, for some reason, that's in good fashion for an exotic dealer. You got in, in style. I like to hear that already. We're off on the right foot. Lonny, is there any chance I saw you once at Manheim, Pennsylvania auto auction?
I used to spend a lot of time there.
Yeah, because you look familiar, and I swear I ran into you maybe years ago. But all right, so you've answered my question. There is a chance.
There is. Okay, so how many years ago do you think it was?
It was maybe, I'm just estimating, maybe like a decade, 10 years, maybe.
I think that's probably a good chance you saw me there.
Let's go, baby.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah. I mean, I spent most of my career in the auction.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. That's how I ended up in the car business for so long. I started on a different path.
So tell us about your path, because you've had interesting career. I know you were at AutoNation, which I didn't expect, not for any specific reason. I just knowing you're operating exotic dealership now, thought that was an interesting start. But can you give us a little overview of how everything progressed to the point where you're at today?
Yeah. So look, right place, right time for me to get into CarMax. I was 19 years old, applied for a sales position, went to quite a few interviews and vibed real well with the team there. And they offered me, they asked me, have you ever considered being a buyer? And I don't know what a buyer does. So not really. Made me an offer right then and there.
Lonny, a question I've always wondered, what's it like being a buyer? Does this truly, you've obviously had a tremendous success post that role, which is some testament to what the role teaches you. But how does it actually work? Right? Do you have just authority to, raise the hand for everything? We used to see CarMax buyers in lane. We would just walk away. We'd be like, all right, it's a lost cause. Anything over a certain CR, they're going to buy. So What is it really like?
Okay, look, I told you I started when I was 19, almost 49 now. I can tell you what it was like back then. I don't know quite what it's like now, but yeah, you were taught, look, you were taught what core inventory was, and it was very analytical with what needed to be purchased. You were buying cars that were not even sold yet. So you were predicting basis to fill going forward, right? So it's kind of in the box buying. And then what made the difference between, I guess, a good buyer and a really good buyer was buying outside of that box. You'd go to the auction, look at your run list, walk your cars, write down what run numbers you're going to look for, and you can run all day long around, you know how big Manheim is, right? But then as you're running from lane to lane, your eye gets caught on something else, right? And so being able to run around a car, evaluate it, spit out a number, all within the seconds that it takes from it to get from outside the lane to that auction block. So, it's auction savvy, right? That company was phenomenal with how they would teach you how to look at a car. You approach the car from the exact same angle every single time. You walk around it in the exact same way, open doors in the same pattern. That back look across all the panels just so you don't miss anything. You ever describe a car to anybody whenever you're trying to get a bid? Right. And so when you're describing it, I can't tell you how many buyers that I've seen go look at a car and they'll notice a cracked windshield. Maybe it needs some tires. You come inside. Okay, haul the car to me. Well, they'll call a car to you for what it is, Ford Expedition, XLT, blah, 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 so forth, all the options. But they'll forget from the time that they appraised it in the parking lot or the auction lane to tell you about the windshield, even though they saw it and they knew it. So they would teach you systematically how to walk the car, look at the car, describe the car. And it was, again, this was 30 years ago, but it's still stuck with me today.
So let's fast forward. I'm fascinated. How does a used car guy evolve into the president of one of the leading luxury car dealerships in Texas, if not the world? Give us an overview of this evolution. And I know a lot went in between, but let's just start with AutoNation and the experience that led you up to where you're at today. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, look, as you can tell, I'm long-winded. I can give you a lot of words.
I'll condense you.
All right. Look, I think at the end of the day, what it comes down to is work ethic, right? I mean, when you're young and coming up in the business, even in today's world, most people don't do what they're hired to do, right? You kind of have to prod them, you have to direct them, you have to always kind of follow up with them. And back then, all I did was do my job. I didn't do any more because I didn't know to do more. I didn't do any less because I couldn't do less. I was collecting a paycheck. So I'm doing my job. And because of doing my job, I'm getting opportunities, right? And so I'm getting pay raises. I'm getting promotions. And I saw this and I'm going, wait a minute. I'm not really doing anything special here, right? I'm just doing what you hired me to do. And then when I realized that I was getting recognition for doing those things, I'm like, okay, well, what if I do a little bit extra? And I started taking initiative and finding solutions for maybe problems that didn't have a solution yet. And I started going the extra mile for different things and even simple things like picking up trash on the way back into the office building. Those things get noticed. But that's what it came down to. Yeah, that's what it came down to is learning a good work ethic and then really applying that across the board. And of course, as you advance, then you develop some strategies and some skills that add to it. At the beginning of it all was developing that. Again, my parents gave us good morals, difference between wrong and right? Doing the right thing. I mean, that's just always kind of been the basis or the foundation of my growth.
To say the least, you've had tremendous performance at your current Post Oak Motors, and you've achieved $5 million in pre-tax profits, significant increase from what it was prior to you coming in. I mean, even going before that, you had many, many achievements at AutoNation. How do you cultivate that culture? Like, give us some of the juicy details. You mentioned hiring processes. We can start with that.
Yeah, you just said it. I mean, if there was a one-word description for it all, it's culture. And so our hiring processes, we focus on hiring personality before anything else. I mean, you can train skills, all right? You can train a mechanic how to work on a car. You can train a salesperson the steps, but you cannot train personality, right? And so when we hire, I kind of have a little bit of a process for the actual department manager needing that employee does the initial interview. Of course, because they are trying to fulfill a need, their mind is going to be more like, I need this person, right? So, yep, they've got some experience. They checked a couple of boxes and maybe they're making that decision because of that need. But I always require the next interview to be another department manager. And if another department manager is not available, maybe another senior associate in another department. And that interview is purely based on culture, right? I mean, there's a series of questions to ask, but really it's, does this person vibe? Will they want to come work here? Or will we want to come work with them? The saying around here is nobody wants to work with anybody they don't want to come to. Right? You don't want to get up in the morning and say, God dang, I got to go. So-and-so is on my shift today, and it's going to be a rough day. So we kind of try to get ahead of that. Those two interviews kind of pass and it gets to me. I don't really do an interview. I do more of a Q&A session. I say me now. I've got GMs that run the stores and they do the same thing. But for as long as I did it was a Q&A question. I said, look, I mean, long and short is if you're sitting here in front of me, likely that the department manager that you interviewed with would possibly offer you the position. But let me tell you, we've made you an offer, or we may make you an offer, and it's on you to accept it. So you still have to come back. You have to accept it based on what you know about it. So why don't we spend this time filling in those gaps to make sure you know everything you need? And in that, anything you want to know about the company, I'll answer. I may ask some questions just to kind of prod that conversation along. But at the end of it all, there's pretty much three things I say to every single of, what do we have, 150 employees right now that I've talked to so far. One, we're a do the right thing environment. So if I've got to make the decision between doing the right thing and making money, it's always going to be doing the right thing. And that goes by the customer and the associate. We don't mess with anybody's paychecks. Somebody says they left their sunglasses in the car and it's not there. We're going to buy a pair of sunglasses. We don't argue about the little thing, right? The other thing is we make it very, very clear that job that you're applying for, yes, it does have a general area of responsibility, finance manager, order, mechanic, but but that's a general area of responsibility here. And if you this is happening in my conversation, if you cannot live with that, if you only want to come to work to do what you think you're applying for, don't accept, right? So, again, this is, we established that right up front. And, look, theoretically, in the future, if I had to have a conversation with somebody because they crossed the line or colored outside the lines, I could always go back to, hey, remember when we first talked, right? Remember when we had that conversation? You know what? I haven't had to do that yet. I can't tell you how many years it's been since I've had to do that.
This episode is brought to you by Auto Hauler Exchange. Ship smarter, pay less, no middleman. Auto Hauler Exchange connects dealers directly with haulers. The result, faster deliveries, lower cost, and zero broker hassle. Learn more by visiting autohaulerexchange.com. That's autohaulerexchange.com or clicking the link in the show notes below. Lonny, where did you clearly run a very systematic approach to just recruiting and hiring. Where did you learn that?
I think I developed that skill at AutoNation, right? I mean, so I was there for 18 years and they had their own processes. I started out in a store as a used car manager in the beginning. I worked for about eight to 10 years in and out. I was on the regional staff, right? And I got to meet general managers all over the country, really. And I got to see how some of the most successful stores were operated and what the culture was like in those. And I also got to see how some poorly run stores were operated and kind of why they were running that way. So I learned, I didn't create any of what I do on my own. I really took best practices from a lot of really talented people and maybe not so talented people in learning what not to do. I was very, very blessed and privileged to be able to see that. And when I had a chance to be a general manager myself, I kind of put it all into play. At the BMW store I was running before I came here, I don't remember hiring any after I got there in sales with experience. I had my staff that was already there and tenured, but everybody else we hired afterwards was no experience, straight out of college.
And what were you looking for? Just character, ability to learn? Was it really the intangibles?
Yeah, the intent. Again, those things you cannot teach. Communication skills, not that you couldn't sharpen them. If you got it, you got it, right?
Let's take that one level deeper then, right? I think many operators, many businesses, many dealers would love to do that. But I think the reality on the ground floor is that many are under-resourced and they don't have the time or resources to properly train these inexperienced individuals. I just have to imagine that if you think, why doesn't everyone do what you do, right? And I'm trying to, play devil's advocate here. I would say, oh, well, if you're an operator who's maybe running very thin, you say, hey, I don't have time to train someone up or whatnot. What is your training regimen? How do you bring these inexperienced people, which have, you're sniffing out great potential, but how do you really get them to be top performers, this is actually going to lead into my next question, which is the performance you've had, which has been phenomenal. And I want to dig into that. But let's just start there, right? How do you train your team members? What's your process like?
One, that's a fair question because I get it, right? There's so many dynamics that can get in the way of onboarding people right. I've done it wrong too, by the way. So I'm going to tell you how I've done it successfully, but that doesn't mean I didn't fail along the way to get to that point.
Yeah, I'll just say real quick, it's all like a time horizon thing. If you think about it, you mentioned that hiring manager who wants to just bring someone with experience to maybe plug a hole real quick, right? They're trying to solve for a short-term pain. I get it. It's your job as the leader to maybe help them think a little bit more longer term and to be a little bit more disciplined and to hire that person that might need a little bit more ramp up in training, but long-term will be better. So it always comes down to just, time horizons and bridging that gap. That's sort of how I've seen it. But go ahead.
No, you're right. And there's a greater cost to hiring the wrong person, right?
Oh, I know.
Both in dollars, right? There's real dollars associated with hiring the wrong person. Even if they don't do anything wrong or are just underperformers, you still have to pay. That onboarding process still takes money, right? Doing the background checks take money. So you kind of have to pull it back a little bit, right? But to onboard and train, like let's say a salesperson, that's probably the hardest one, train, right? Unless you have a process. I remind you, I was working for a public company, and then most dealerships, you're on commission from the start. You run out there and you got to go make your money to make a paycheck. I did not believe that was the right approach. I think that people, in order for them to be successful, in order for them to have a chance to be successful, the one thing they shouldn't have to worry about is how am I going to pay my rent and how am I going to put food on the table? Especially if we're a green pea, right, with no experience, I don't even know how to sell a car, and you're telling me my job, my paycheck depends on me selling a car. So I created a small salary plus bonus program in the public company, and which I still do to this day, about a salary plus bonus program. I use my CarMax experience. I pair these associates up with a mentor, and I sell the mentor on, a another senior salesperson. The selling point to them to help out, to onboard this person is basically got a free assistant, right? So they got a liner closer, right? They're going to help you put deal packets together. They're going to help you get the car out of detail, put gas in it. I mean, all of the grunt work, right? But that new associate's learning the process and they're going to be delivering cars. Now you can go take another opportunity and somebody else is delivering your car for the next 2 or 3 hours if you're doing it right. That was pretty well received by all of my senior associates and they're still getting full commission. They're not splitting deals.
But they got an apprentice.
But they got an apprentice. And then, that process typically, I didn't rush it, right? I would not put somebody I wouldn't invest that time and money and then put somebody out there if they weren't. It was constant communication. At the end of every month, you sit down, you do a little coaching, you look at all the numbers, you kind of go, but there's a lot more that I don't know what kind of time you have, but there's a lot more we can get into a deeper dive on that.
No, I get it. All right. Before we move on, can you give us an overview of just what brands you carry, your scale, right? Like volume. Can you give us an overview?
So Bentley, Rolls-Royce are our primary luxury, ultra luxury. We have Lotus that we just onboarded. We've sold we received our first cars last month. We sold out a batch of inventory. We have Bugatti since we sold an average of 2 a year from 2000 to now. We have vintage Broncos. I don't know if you've heard of that, but
yeah. I've seen them on Instagram.
Yeah, that's been a really cool success story for us. I mean, they're a phenomenal group. This whole modern vintage has really hit home with a lot of our clients. I mean, look, those Resto Broncos, awesome looking vehicles, but I mean, you crank them up with those Coyote engines, they're loud, they still smell like gasoline, they will still leak. These modern vintages you get all the modern day technology, airbags. Hispano Suiza is a unique brand. It's about a $2.5 million electric car. What's unique about that company is they're well over 100 years old. They started building coaches back when Bentley and Rolls-Royce, phenomenal.
Talk to me about the tremendous just performance improvement you brought to the store. I want to understand, right, getting to 5 million plus pre-tax profits and beyond, what levers did you pull in order to achieve that sort of success?
So first approach was really plugging holes, right? You come into a store and you kind of observe. I'll be honest, the first couple of million that we put back on the books were simply that, right? Putting the right pockets
just clean up.
in place.
Yeah.
Right turn times on the inventory, cleaning up the aging inventory, just simple things like that. I did. Then I got into the culture part of it. And mind you, this was 8 years ago. So look, when you have the wrong people, I mean, I'm a big believer in saving people. When you have the wrong people, you have to acknowledge it, identify it.
Yeah.
I replaced a lot, almost 90% of not what I wanted to do, but it was necessary. And doing that in combination with putting the right process in place and then bringing in branding and marketing really is what elevated. It's amazing. You kind of, one of those things you almost have to see to believe, right? Because we do spend more time, more efforts on the after sale than we do leading up. Mm-hmm. I don't want to take any efforts away from my sales staff. They do a great job.
Of course.
But it's a lot, the workload comes after.
Talk to me about just generating demand. Are you, mainly word of mouth? I'm just curious, how do you get the new clients in the door?
Right. No billboards, no radio, no TV. So yeah, word of mouth is
no billboards either, huh?
No.
It's interesting because, I the first thing I think of is a Kerbeck here in New Jersey. And obviously, they have lots of luxury brands, not as many as you here, but I've definitely seen some Kerbeck billboards. Just makes sense.
It's all about being a household name, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say we didn't have the greatest reputation before. Where you build that is to be there. I mean, we do concierge service. We do pick up and drop off. And look, if you live here in Houston and you don't buy a car from me because I won't match a unreasonable discount from another dealer, I will encourage you to buy that vehicle and I'll service it for you as if you bought it from me, right? We just don't want to get into, yes, are the margins big on these deals? Does it all fall to the bottom line? No, right? That's where we spend. That is our marketing money. That's where we spend most of our money. Mm-hmm. Again, pick up, drop off. I mean, I pick up all the way to Mississippi in an enclosed trailer that's pulled by a truck that we own at all. Flatbeds that
it's literally about going the extra mile.
All of my company vehicles are new, right? All of my trucks that are non-luxury trucks that are hauling parts around or hauling cars around are new. They're logoed up. They're luxurious. They're clean. It's all about the image and everything you do.
Give us a little sneak peek into the P&L. Specifically, I'm curious to know, from marketing spend as a percentage of revenue or, net margin, right? Typical dealership is what, like 5% net margin? Are you operating, 10%? Are you,
no,
just curious
no.
how it works.
I mean, I wish we were. And you know what? Look, we could get there, right? If we were willing to cut some of these things out that I said that we're doing, yeah, we could get there. But you know what? We're falling in the normal single digit net margins like everybody else is.
Got it.
Right.
So higher gross margin, but also higher expense, essentially.
I've quadrupled my expense since I took over, right? And so, look, I keep an eye on it. That's what we're supposed to do. Is some of it a little frivolous? Could be, right? So you could trim here and there, but some of the things, like I said, we've chosen not to cut back on our social media, not to cut back on our marketing, not to cut back on our content creation, not to cut back on inventory, right? I mean, look, when interest rates went up, there was a time when I was paying $20,000 and $30,000 a month for carrying my inventory. Now I'm paying $150,000. Do you go back and cut your inventory to cut costs? I mean, some people could, but then where does your relevance go? We spent all this time, effort, money to become what we were, to have the reputation that we have. I didn't want to walk it backwards.
This episode is brought to you by Podium. Fast response times aren't just a nice to have, they're your competitive edge. With Podium's AI BDC, dealerships are seeing an 80% increase in after-hours appointments by handling leads 24/7. This conversational AI acts like your best sales rep, booking test drives, answering questions, and connecting with your customers instantly, even on nights and weekends. Plus, AI allows your team to focus on what matters most, closing deals. Don't let leads slip through the cracks. Turn interest into sales day or night with Podium. Learn more by texting CDG to 385-293-3461. That's CDG to 385-293-3461, or click the link in the show notes below. What's considered success for you on an average sense with a brand, right? You're not expecting to sell 100 a month of a brand, clearly. So what's your benchmark for success with these ultra luxury brands?
To have my unfair share of the market.
And when you say market, are you looking nationally or are you looking regionally? How do you think about it?
Both. We pay attention to both numbers. So regionally, I want to be the number one, which we are for the last couple of years. Number one in Texas plus. Nationally, look, I know that I cannot compete with Bremen. I cannot compete with West Palm and Beverly Hills. But once you take those dealers out of the mix, I want to be the very first one after them. And so we typically fall in number 1, 2, or 3 after you take the big dealers. And we've been happy there. I'm not satisfied.
You mentioned like sending an enclosed trailer to, Massachusetts or wherever. So I'm curious, what is your unfair advantage, right? Because yes, you are servicing the Texas market, but you're really servicing, a customer that could be almost anywhere, likely has multiple homes, splits their time. I don't know. So when you mention these other names, right? Beverly Hills, Bremen, West Palm, what is your, how do you compete with them? Is it really proximity to your customer, or is there something else I'm not thinking of?
That's a good look. It's tough, right? They're in concentrated areas. They got a lot of population. They have the advantage of volume. I try really honestly to keep my inventory in the state. So I try very hard not to sell across state lines, because I also want to be able to, just like anybody else, you want to have that car park or the units in operation, and you want to be able to service them. The customers,
okay.
The clients that I do sell to out of state, I said we go down I-10, right? So there's no Rolls Royce or Bentley dealer from here to Mississippi. So we legitimately do service those clients all the way out to the States. Anywhere else that I sell a car outside of that area, it's typically a client that's been with us. If somebody calls here from another state and is looking for a deal to beat their local store, I just won't get him. I mean, we'll give them a quote, but I'm not going to get into a battle and cheap sell inventory that, again, I have no chance of either probably seeing a second purchase for, or a trade, or servicing.
How does that work with inventory allocation? You go to most mainstream brands and, the automakers trying to stuff you with inventory at times, too much, and you just don't want it. With you, do you have to, beg for supply, or what's the dynamic with the automaker?
Your factories are your partners, right? You don't work for each other. You're all there to achieve the same goals. It's a two-way street. There's going to be times where they've got cars parked and they need to distribute them to dealers, and you need to be helpful as a partner to take that load off. And there's going to be times where you need inventory because you've already sold out of everything that you were allocated. Everybody does it a little bit differently. It's not your typical earn and burn like other big brands. But for us, it's we have a big order, right? So I'm always 50 to 100 cars deep in order, and those take priority. So, and we got there long before COVID. So when COVID hit, I mean, we sailed through it, never missed a beat, or made money like everybody else did. But it wasn't just because people were paying sticker for cars. It was because I actually had cars to sell. Every car that I had pre-ordered came in, and everybody took delivery. So again, when you have an order bank like that, that's true. What I mean true is the car comes in. I didn't put it in somebody's name just to get the inventory. It's actually delivering to the name that was on the original, right? And so if you measure that by a percentage, we're delivering 80+% of everything that we pre-ordered, then factories will see that as good business and reward you with additional inventory.
So talk to me about like going further down the funnel, thinking about demand for this inventory. What is the elasticity like with your consumer base? And I mean, we've gone through some of the craziest economic cycles over the past 5 years, right? What impact do you see when interest rates suddenly rise, several percent, several points? Like, does that impact your business directly, or are your customers just so freaking like post-economic that your business is actually very consistent because you're beyond the $70,000 luxury car range, right? Just give us a little insight into like market trends within your sector.
That's an excellent question.
That's what I'm here for.
The answer is the second half of what you just said is we don't get affected. Our volume doesn't go up in peaks and valleys based on the economic.
You're somewhat recession proof.
Yeah, recession resistant, I would say. But
recession resistance.
I'll say proof that. I'm gonna have to knock on if I say that.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what does dramatically change. What you will see is, you'll see a finance penetration change. You'll go from, when I got here, we were at 20% finance penetration, so 80% cash. We, over the years, bumped that up to about 70% finance penetration, which was great, which means more profit to the bottom line. But when you see things like interest rates going up, that number came back down.
And when you say finance penetration is more profitable for you, is that driven by holding points or is there other drivers? The reason I ask is because, again, sophisticated customer might be more sensitive to that. I'm just curious kind of how that works.
So would it seem outlandish if I told you that I have a max of 1.5% markup?
No, I think that's smart because I just think you have a sophisticated customer that knows what's going to happen. And if you are transparent about it, you're consistent. I think it serves the customer well that you're serving.
If somebody's buying multiple products, sure, we'll give a discount for a bundle, but it's not just the no haggle part. If you're asking the right money, then you're justified in making the margin, right? If you're not asking too much, then you're going to sell a whole lot more volume of that product. And you know what the other thing is? You don't want to put yourself in a position to get singled out for, let's say, something like a discrimination, right? Where just because somebody was a different ethnicity and they happen to pay a point more or a few hundred more, we don't want to get into that world at all. So you got to protect your company too.
Yeah. I think regardless, it's a smart long-term play for the brand. Like, even if that wasn't a factor, reputationally, you're maintaining a very kind of strong just credibility for what you do and what you offer. Talk to me a little bit about the brands. We haven't really discussed that. It's obviously a pretty core part to what you do. What is just give us a little sentiment. Obviously, these are all your babies in a sense, but I'm just curious, like what's hot, what's not. Just give us a little pulse of the luxury market.
Oh, I'd say that in the Rolls world, of course, Cullinan is your bread and butter, right? I mean, that's your volume vehicle. If Phantom has done, it's a low volume vehicle, but there's still some really good buyers out there. And when they build them, they're sixes and sevens on the price points on just a regular Phantom. We've sold some over $1 million. Well, as a matter of fact, we sold one that was $2 million a couple of years ago. But yeah, the new Spectre, the Rolls-Royce Spectre, is a pretty phenomenal looking vehicle. It's an all electric car, but man, it will surprise you with its look, with its drivability, its performance. I'm telling you, you're a car guy. If you got in that vehicle not knowing it was an electric car, you would never know.
How's your customer base reacting to electric vehicles in general?
I've lost count of how many Spectres we've sold, but I pre-sold almost 70. They're all gone.
So I would say other than that, are you really bullish or bearish on any specific brands? Do you see any brands maybe making, mistakes, going backwards or anything specific?
Well, you can't put me into that box. If I say the wrong thing about the wrong...
That's what I'm here for, right?
I won't say anything bad about any brand. I mean, look, I will say this. I love where Bentley's going right now. There was a trajectory where they were starting to wind down their engines and go into an electric mode. And then they reversed course. And now they're coming back out with putting hybrids and everything. But let me tell you, that hybrid, you have to think more Formula One, right? It's all about a turbocharged V8 in there. You've got these electric motors that rip the car off the line and over 700 horsepower. So it's still still it's the most powerful Bentley they've put out so far, and you're going to get that in all the models. So they're doing a great job. Lotus, I mean, I think Lotus is the funnest little car. I don't know if you've been in the new Emira.
I haven't
lately. It's very impressive. I mean, you've got a 6-cylinder and you've got a 4-cylinder AMG Mercedes engine there, and that car it's got all the sound, got the feedback, got the performance, all this little package loaded up. I think there's a lot of runway on that car right now.
How do you
feel? We bought a Chevrolet store.
No. I was going to ask you, what's your demo policy? So you may have just answered that. Everyone drives a Chevy. No, but tell us about it. Wait, so tell us about why you bought a Chevy store, then tell us about your demo policy. For anyone that's listening that doesn't know what a demo is, I always try to be cognizant of our new listeners. Demo is just, a vehicle, a demonstration, right? I think that's what it stands for, actually. I actually don't know if it stands for demonstration. I assume it does. But regardless, a demo, right? The vehicle that you drive. If you're the manager or someone at the dealership, you take a car from the lot, that's a demo. So there you go.
So prior to our purchase for Chevrolet, I would drive mostly Bentley demo, which is beautiful.
That's nice. Just a casual Bentley. Just drive that. I'm in the Toyota Yaris, but get the Bentley.
Well, so yeah, we bought this Chevrolet store back in September, and it's been a phenomenal. I mean, we've always had an eye out for growth in our company. We probably looked at $2 billion worth of deals leading up to that. Never hooked up on any of them, but got a lot of education, got a lot of information on what was happening out there in the market. And this store came up in our hometown in Houston, so it just kind of fit perfectly. It was a one-owner store with a great reputation, community, outreach, great culture, just kind of fit perfect. So yeah, since we've taken over the store, we've kept every single employee from top to bottom because their culture is exactly
strong
like ours.
What's it like going from ultra luxury to mainstream? Has that, I understand culture is strong, but has that operating just to transition for you, has that been more or less smooth? Do you think it's like a pretty easy transition to go from ultra luxury to mainstream as opposed to going from mainstream to ultra luxury?
I think exactly that. I think it's much easier to go from ultra luxury because you can take a lot of your approach, right? I mean, what's wrong with selling a Chevy Tahoe and treating them like they're buying a Rolls Royce? Absolutely nothing, right? But
treat a Bentley customer like they're buying a Chevy Cruze.
That's a different story.
So, I missed a Cruze.
Yeah. And there's probably quite a few of those stories out there right now. But for us, our approach is to give that client base exactly the same experience that they would have here. Hospitality, we're very aware it's a competitive market. We're very aware that price does have a factor in this deal. But you know what? Our approach has not let us down yet. We have grown the business since we've taken over. We have been in the top 9 in the city out of 33, 34 stores since we've taken over, where it wasn't in the top 10 before. It's been a blast. We're having a lot of fun.
What's something that's in the back of your mind that's maybe concerning you, right? When you think about the next year, this upcoming year, and just the business, the macro, everything together, does anything kind of keep you up at night? Any major challenges that you think about?
Look, over the years, I think there's been a lot of things that have happened that keep me up at night. Most of it is the economy, right? You've got to follow those trends. That's one of the reasons why we want to diversify even more, have luxury, have domestic, and have import. Because at any given time, one of those brands, right, or brand segment is going to be affected. I remember when the tsunami hit Japan. I mean, Nissan, Toyota, Mitsubishi, I mean, all those brands were affected. And if you didn't have domestic and luxury stores to offset it, you could have been in trouble. When the domestic General Motors and Chrysler at the time went bankrupt, you had to lean on your import and luxury store. So there's always going to
diversifying. I get it.
You've got to diversify. So, but what keeps me up at night right now is, are we doing the right thing every day? Like my whole team, we all talk on the way home and we all share. So I've got, my marketing directors and my operations directors and my group controller, we're all constantly talking, recapping our days to make sure nothing is getting away from us, or we're not seeing any trends, or are we seeing any trends that we need to get ahead of? So it's mostly did we do the right thing, right? Did we miss something?
I have to imagine that given how experiential the car buying process is with you, that direct to consumer is not something that you really think about too much for your market segment. Would you say that's correct? And I say that because you can do that if you're selling a $20,000, $30,000 vehicle that is just 4 wheels. You've made such an emphasis on your experience and how you've entered this exclusive club, which makes total sense for your customer base. I don't feel like you could get that with a direct-to-consumer sale from the automaker.
I'm glad you brought that up. And that is a legit concern, you know.
Interesting. So it is a concern for you.
You're right. It is a legit concern. But yeah, I don't believe it. You lose everything that we just talked about in this whole segment.
That's what I'm saying, which I'm saying, like, that's actually, you have some defensibility from that. If anything, it's sort of like it's a moat.
Absolutely. And who do you got doing it right now? You have, of course, Tesla, who started it. You have Rivian. You have Fisker, didn't make it again for the second time. And then now you've got Scout, which is, so that's what really kind of bothers me. It's a Scout, but Scout's a Volkswagen company, right? And so now the Volkswagen's already struggling. And now you're taking what could be a successful product away from the dealers. Now you've got Honda, and Honda's partnered up with Sony.
Yeah, Sony, Afeela.
Yeah. So Afeela. Yeah. So that's just, that's a little alarming, because it gives a little bit, who else is looking, right? Who's standing in line saying, okay, we're next, right? There's 18,000 dealerships for a reason, right? We're all involved in our community. Tell me a dealership in this entire country that doesn't have somebody coming to their door asking to sponsor the local baseball, the kids this, charity for that, the women's shelter. I mean, and because we have this responsibility to the community, but I mean, how do you do that if there's no local presence, right? Our whole team lives, right? They all participate.
Touche. Lonny, it's been an awesome conversation. So couple things before we wrap up. Number one is we didn't get to the demo policy. So what's the demo policy? Give it to us.
At the Chevy store, all the managers do get demos. They all drive pretty much pickup trucks. And today, if you ask me what I'm driving a 3/4 ton Chevy crew cab.
My man.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, look, I drive over 100 miles a day. I want to sit up high.
And then what about managers at the luxury stores? What are we talking about here? No demos.
These cars are too expensive.
I don't blame you. I'm just asking.
Yeah.
All right.
But they do get a
moolah.
What are they? Yeah.
Reimbursement. All right. Secondly, you told me that you had a question for me, so I have to give you the opportunity to ask me the question.
Well, yeah. You told me you asked me if I've ever been to Mannheim, PA, and I said yes. You think you saw me there? So what's your background? Tell me about why you're there. How long were you in the lane?
I was in the lanes for definitely under 10 years, but somewhere in between 5 to 10, I would say. Started in the used car business, grew it into a nationwide online auto retailer that I formed, and found my journey leading up to here, car dealership guy, which was a really big accident. It was a very initially unintentional, then it became very intentional, but it's sort of scratching my own itch where, sharing insights to the market, people found it valuable, something that I did not have when I was, growing up as a younger dealer. And I took it and I said, we're going to scale this. We formed it into a media company, so a real business. And that allowed us to start investing more in our content. So now, we do podcasts, newsletters, news, social media. We're by far the fastest growing automotive retail media platform. We also have the largest audience of engaged dealers. I put the emphasis on engaged because anyone can say that they have a dealer, subscribing or whatever, but our audience, our dealers, our industry professionals, our vendor partners, they actually listen to the content. So, we're pretty proud of that. And dude, I'm having a blast, man. I just get to learn from smart people like you, see different experiences. It's just really been incredible. So I wish I knew you were at NADA, because I would have loved to have you at our party, but there's always next year or maybe before that. Who knows?
That would have been awesome. Maybe a time before that for sure. But hey, listen, I think this is a great podcast. I think you're very professional, very well spoken. This has kind of been fun.
I love it. Well, then the second someone tells me it's been fun, I got to tee them up for round 2. So we'll have to talk about that in the future. But I will say you clearly have a really strong training. And I think for any potential talent that's listening, sales managers, GMs that want to get in touch with you, we'll throw up your links in the show notes at the bottom, because we do have lots of up and comers that listen to the podcast. And you never know, man. Someone might be looking for a new home, whether they're in Texas or not, but we'll definitely put that out there. Dude, this has been incredible. Thank you for coming on. And like I said, I'll definitely want to stay in touch and kind of hear how you're doing.
Sounds good, man. Look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks, Lonny. All right. Hope you enjoyed that episode. Please give the podcast a rating, consider subscribing to the show, and check the show notes for links to what we talked about. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys next time.